Well, welcome everybody. It's so nice to have you all join us today for the fifth annual Musician Entrepreneur Conference. My name is Judy Marseilles, and I'm a musician and a member of the Hamilton Music Advisory Team. This is the second time we have all hosted the conference virtually, and we are grateful to have local musicians joining us live on Zoom and watching on Facebook. And I just heard a few minutes ago, we have the largest attendance we've ever had. So yay, welcome, welcome, welcome. We learned last year that hosting a virtual conference can make it easier for musicians who may be less conventional schedules to join and learn. So for convenience, the discussion will be recorded and available to watch on Facebook and YouTube. As we start today's discussion panel, we recognize that we are situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of our wonderful predecessors. The land is covered by the dish with one spoon wampum belt covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge, my apologies here, I'm trying to read it in a small print. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history and heritage of the land so that we can better understand our role as neighbors, partners, and caretakers. With these intentions in mind, we gather as members of Hamilton's music industry to share our knowledge and our experiences. Today, we support the development and retention of the Hamilton musicians and the local music scene. Musicians are recognized as core creators within the local music industry, and without you, the industry cannot grow or thrive. We thank you for all your good work, your creativity, and we want to see you grow and succeed as entrepreneurs and musicians, which is why we organize this annual professional development event. The annual conference is possible through the work of volunteers on the Hamilton Music Advisory Team, which I'm very proud to be a member of, and the Musicians Conference Working Group with support from the City of Hamilton staff, and thank you all. I am now pleased to introduce the co-chair of the Hamilton Music Advisory Team, Lisa LaRocca, who will be the moderator of today's discussion. So Lisa, I understand that you're going to introduce yourself. So if I may, ladies and gentlemen, Lisa LaRocca. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. My name is Lisa LaRocca. I'm Director of Operations at Sonic Unyon Records and Supercrawl Productions. And as Judy said, I'm the co-chair of the Hamilton Music Advisory Team. I'm so happy to be here to moderate today's discussion. Today's conversation is called Know Your Worth, where we look to provide some advice to emerging and independent musicians about getting paid for your work and advocating to protect yourself, your time, your brand, and your intellectual property. So I'm thrilled to welcome today's speakers. They're industry experts who have a lot of experience helping artists negotiate contracts and opportunities. Joining me will be speakers Kiana Brooks-Eastman, Tao Ming Lau, and Danielle Baudin. So our conversation should last about 30 minutes. Then the last 15 minutes will be saved for a question and answer session. So you can put your questions in the Zoom chat or comment on the Facebook Live video at Hamont Music, and they'll filter the questions to me to ask our guests. Okay, so to start, let's hear a little bit about our speakers. So Danielle, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So I have been playing instruments my whole life, and I was a local musician. I would play open mics and started to do some live gigs and stuff like that when I was about 18. In high school, I worked in a recording studio just sort of as an assistant engineer and did a co-op program there. And what that sort of led to a lot of opportunities with playing live shows and just like honing the craft and getting good. We released an album in 2016, and ever since then, we've just kind of been plugging away. And as independent musicians, we're proud of where we are now, and we're still trying to get farther and farther. But we've been nominated for a few awards in Ontario, and yeah, we're just trying to keep it going from here. So yeah, that's it.
Great, thanks, Danielle. Rooks, would you like to go next?
Hello, hello. You got so good that we needed to freeze and focus on how good you got in your career. So, shout out all the other panelists. Very excited to be here. I've recently moved myself to Hamilton, and I'm so excited about Hamilton. Yes, I know, Tao, I know you.
Right, so did I. This is serendipitous.
Yeah, listen, and this
serendipitous. Yeah, I just moved here too.
It's an amazing city, and for all the people who are on this call and attending, I really have strong faith in the growth and development of Hamilton's art and culture sector, and so, it's not about getting to Toronto. It's not about needing to be somewhere else. It's about using the resources you have in front of you. So yeah, I am the founder of Sandbox Studios. I'm also now the Chief Executive Officer of the Toronto Musicians Association, which is the largest union that represents musicians, across Toronto, but the largest in Canada. And again, serendipitous, Tao works for the company that headhunted me. So, very, very excited to be on this call, and share. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rooks. Extremely exciting that you've both moved to Hamilton recently. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as we get talking. Tao Ming, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, totally. So I guess new Hamilton transplant here of a year. Super excited to be part of this event because of that. I guess my intersections with Hamilton, just anecdotally, I've worked with Supercrawl and Tim for many years just through my agency gig at Billions. I started my first live sort of agency role at a Chicago-based booking agency called Billions, which is, I was booking Shad, Bashik Bulat there, Wolf Parade, Charlotte Day Wilson, a whole bunch of, it was kind of like an indie rock empire, but had some really good rap and hip hop artists as well. We booked Wu-Tang for a little bit. I think after 7 to 8 years in the corporate music space, I had previously was at Universal Music Canada in Toronto and with 604 Records in Vancouver, where I'm born and raised, starting in like West Coast pop music, Carly Rae Jepsen, who's another Vancouver girl. I just got sick of making white men 10% commissions. So I just wanted to start my own gig. And that's really, I think, the passion behind Blue Crane of an agency I started a couple years ago, which has a diversity mandate of repping female musicians, BIPOC musicians, LGBTQ musicians. I'm a gay Chinese woman, so those are I fit into all those three worlds, and those are artists I feel most passionate about repping. So yeah, our roster was founded with DJ Indian from Chalk Called Red, Zaki Ibrahim. We currently have Shay Leah, Clarelle, Loren, an awesome new folk artist in Montreal. Bambi, we've done, awesome bookings with her. We have like a robust female electronic producer and DJ roster, which is really close to my heart. And then professionally and volunteer work, I'm a board director at Polaris Music Prize and Canadian Live Music Association. And yeah, my goal in life is just to get more BIPOC and minority folks hired, elevated in this world in music and the arts. And I also do diversity HR consulting on the side, which is what Brooks had mentioned, for Searchlight Entertainment, a firm in Toronto. Thanks for having me here.
Great, thank you so much. As you can tell, everybody on this panel is extremely accomplished. I've been super excited about this all week. So let's get started. So this panel is about knowing your worth as a musician. Not every musician, especially emerging new musicians, know the skills and talent they offer, and as a result, may undervalue themselves. How should a musician identify their value, especially when they're starting out?
I'll start. So I think like your very first step is just, you have to kind of do a self-assessment, and ask yourself, like, you want to really make sure you're getting good. And then if you have started to play some smaller shows, and by that I just mean like you can be like starting out with open mics, which typically are like free shows. Sometimes you can play for tips, things like that. And then when you start to, play for like $100 a show, then you can start to, every time you start to book another show, you can just ask yourself, like, how badly do I want to play this gig? You kind of get to a point where it's like the power of no is really helpful for you. You don't want to oversaturate yourself. So if you're playing gig after gig in Hamilton, let's say, sometimes your value can go down because you're so accessible. But you also, that's like a really, really great way to start out of actually proving your worth at the same time, because every time somebody comes out to see you and you're killing it night after night after night after night, you can say, you know what, maybe I'm ready to take the next step here. But that's kind of like maybe like just kind of like a basic first step way to think about it. But if anybody wants to.
Yeah, if I, when I started out in music almost over a decade ago, I started out as a music manager. And I've always been kind of a business kid. I've always cared about like, what are the actual business rules to the industry I'm engaging in. And so one of the first things I did as a music manager, not really knowing anything, and this is kind of a lawless space, right? Like there's no rules really to, how much people get paid or, who gets paid what. And so I wanted to learn the music business. And it kind of made me think of how all of the industries connect. So if, a great example, Danielle was just speaking about, being a gig musician. If you're going to play at a bar that's empty, there's a good chance they can't pay you, right? Because but this is probably a great time where you're going to try out new things, where you're going to use it as an opportunity to get comfortable with new material. But you might not push the bar owner for that much in that moment. It's really about knowing the whole economy that you're working in, right? I think that sometimes with those empty bars, people are like, I'm worth $500. And sometimes in those full bars, people are like, I'll do it for the opportunity, or I'll do it to get on the stage to open up for this artist, even though they sold 5,000 tickets at $100, right? I think it's really about depending on where you are in your business plan. And I always encourage, artists to treat their careers like a business, because when it's an opportunity or it's not based on the actual route that you've created for yourself. I think that a lot of artists kind of like try to just do things and hope that they all add up to something really large. But you have to be doing things, connected to a plan or connected to, where is this going to take me at the end of this? And so knowing your worth, I really do think is about figuring out where you sit in your market, how long you want to work to get to the next stage, and even just knowing and defining what that next stage is, right? That all comes from market research and you being able to identify that. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. Treat your career like a small business.
Yeah, those are like great overviews of, looking at things, starting out as a gig musician, treating your career like a business. From an agent perspective, I would say your worth will change year to year. Your worth will grow worth might wane. It really depends on what you want to show to the world through your releases, your music videos, online content, your social media accounts, what you're putting out there and what story you're putting out there about yourself. And when, because artists can have silence breaks for 2-3 years and not come out with a single thing, but boom, as soon as they come out with, a new release or a new music video teaser, whether it's, rebranding of a new, even musician name or a new band name, that can be worth a lot. And I think, the agent response is like, when people are reaching out to you to play gigs in your home market, the next step could be outside of your home market, in a secondary market, in the suburbs outside of, where you live, maybe at a campus or a college that might want to book you for like a noontime lunch series, because say your audiences are growing with young kids and folks at university campuses and schools. So it's not just worth in general, it's like, where is your worth? Where specifically are your audiences? Because generally there's about 4 or 5 different types of gigs. There's hard ticket plays and clubs, there's festival plays, and all that is calculated differently in terms of fees. Campus and colleges, private events, and corporate events. So generally it all kind of falls in 4 or 5 different buckets, and knowing your worth of like where you fall, where you might connect with different audiences in those 4 or 5 buckets is really helpful. And then, your fees will also dictate your worth. As your fees grow, it often can be indicative of the demand. But I think it's like, if you're an Ontario-based artist, someone from Alberta has like reached out to you from a club in Edmonton, in a cool space you want to play in, like that is really special. Someone who has heard of you outside of the province, or, so it all really depends, I think, where people are reaching out. But when people start reaching out outside your like local market, your home market, that I think is the beginning of something special, because you can start to sort of plot your routings, your tour routings, your shows, where you can bring your show to market. So I think that's always the exciting point.
Cool. So I have a kind of 2-parter question. So the first part, so musicians that are booking themselves, that are looking for shows, that are trying to set their own rates for themselves and kind of figure out what that value is. Do you have any negotiation tips for them as they're representing themselves? And then Tao, I was hoping you could touch a little bit on when an artist is ready for an agent and when they'll be ready for representation outside of their own.
Cool. I'll take a stab at it. I think one of the most interesting things from being in this space for a long time is going to shows from the perspective of being a manager before. And then also, I got the great opportunity to work with a station in Toronto, G98.7, where I produced a concert series for them. And I think the most interesting, part of the negotiation when working with an artist will kind of be like, they'd say, I want to be paid this much. And you'd be like, okay, are you coming with a band? No, it's just me. Are you playing with track? Number one, if you're playing with track by yourself, it's just you and a track, it's really hard to negotiate that you should be paid more than somebody with a full band, right? And so I think that one of the things that I noticed right away from the manager perspective was, if we wanted to be paid more, we had to bring more value. Being able to play with a live band or live music of some sort really made a difference. And this is obviously not for, actually I've seen it in electric as well, where, people will bring like a live drummer or a live musician to play a long track. But, it is really hard to go to a venue or to a booker and say, yeah, it's just me showing up with my MP3s. I'm going to mail them to you, but I would like to be paid as much as somebody who is going to have 4 or 5 rehearsals and then perform with a full band that also needs to be paid. It really is what you put into it. And I think that Tao kind of was speaking to that, like, what are you putting into, your performance? If I've seen you perform before, even on the booker side, and I know you just kind of stand there, versus an actual show where I'm going to have, an experience of you as an artist those things are going to be calculated very differently. So, typically I always tell people, like, success has a blueprint. Look at, the top of what's happening in your genre. I know this is also a very interesting time for music, if I'm allowed to be honest and candid, where we are seeing a lot of really, top tier artists just kind of walk around that stage. But you really do want to create, an experience and a stage show that people are excited about, that when they leave your show, they tell somebody else, like, hey, I just saw this thing, you should see it too. That's how you're going to garnish that kind of like value in the live market space. So look at who's doing, the best. If you think Beyonce is the best, or if you think, what are they doing, and what is your version of that? Even if you don't have that budget yet, even you can still bring that energy, you can still bring that creativity, and you need to put together an actual set. So I would recommend that in terms of how you are going to determine your value.
That was great. That summed up a lot. As like when sorry, let me start over. I think sometimes it depends on if you're pursuing a gig or if you're being asked to play a show. If like a festival contacts you kind of out of the blue and says, hey, we want you to play our show, we kind of take the tactic of like maybe asking, sometimes you can ask for a little bit more than maybe your standard is, or like your minimum is. That's maybe one tactic to say, like, I'm just going to ask for more, because they can always talk you down. Or you can always ask like, oh, what's your budget, and maybe work around that. Or you can also say, if you have like a baseline or like a minimum that you're willing to play the show for, you can say, okay, well, we normally charge between X and Y. X is like your minimum. And then if they say, okay, well, we can pay you X, then at least you're getting what you want. And they think, okay, well, we're getting a good deal. So it kind of feels like to them like, okay, yeah, we can work with that. If you are like pursuing a gig, sometimes you don't have that kind of bargaining power. Like if you're applying for a gig on like Sonic Bids or something like that, or one of those sites, or you just kind of like cold email somebody that you found the festival email online or something. Sometimes if you just say, hey, here's my bio and a photo and the links to all my socials, and then you're kind of just, you might leave money talk out of it right away. Like you don't want to just be cold emailing somebody being like, hey, we'll play your festival for this much money. You kind of just want to provide your product first. And then when they come back, if they come back and say, hey, we'd love to have you, how much? Or sometimes they'll say, this is our budget, this is what we pay for this time slot. And then you can either say, if you want to try to barter it, then that's your prerogative. But yeah, you have more freedom or more power when they are coming to you with something, because you are providing them the service that they want. That's something that kind of, I had to switch my mindset at one point, because I was like, oh, like they're not doing me a favor. They want me. I'm providing them the service that they want. This is how much it is. And yeah, so when you're independent, sometimes it's nice to have somebody else maybe emailing or contacting, doing these things on your behalf. It just makes it look like you're not the bad guy, but it also kind of elevates the way people perceive you. It's like, oh, well, somebody else is championing this person's music. This other person believes in them. They must, have their stuff together. So that's maybe like another thing you could do. Obviously, everything should be like passed by you and things like that. And if you don't have somebody like that, it's still great to represent yourself and just come in with a lot of confidence.
I would say that the fee question is really tied to hard ticket value. I don't know if folks understand hard ticket values, but that's really how much how many specific tickets can you sell in a particular market, say Hamilton, that's tied to your name as the headliner. So, you know, those are club shows that falls into that bucket. If you know you can sell 50 tickets in Hamilton, that's your hard ticket value. Say at $10 a pop or $15 a pop, you calculate it what $50 times say $10 tickets are, and generally that is that amount would be your fee. Now you have to like calculate obviously show expenses, you know, obviously from Jeremy Freiberger is in the house today, and shout out to him because I've done a bunch of shows with him throughout the pandemic. And you know, he's at Cobalt Connects at the music hall and he's wonderful to work with. But yeah, like, you know, it's all about working with the promoter to find a fair price for that particular act. If you know you can sell and grow your business, that you can sell 200 tickets, say at the Drake Underground, and you've sold that out, that looks really good on your resume. And you can kind of figure out, you know, 200 tickets times $15 a ticket. That's generally your fee, your worth at the time, but you calculate your show, take your show expenses off the top for that. So promoters and event planners will know that, you know, they have to pay their marketing people to promote the show alongside your Instagram marketing. They have to pay people at the door to work security. They have to pay for poster printing and all these expenses that come off the top. So I think you having a knowledge of that as an artist is really, really helpful. In terms of generally headliner fees, support fees, if you're doing that for a club show, support fees, we have an industry standard in North America that's $250 a show. It's abhorrent, like it's horrific. Like no one should be paid $250 a show. It takes a band of 5 to get to the show and pay for meals, and then your money's all gone for $250 a show. But that's generally our industry standard. If you're friends with the band and it's a sold out show at the Danforth Music Hall, you know, you could maybe negotiate with $500, $1,000. It's rare, but it happens. But generally support fees and set lengths are 30 to 45 minutes on stage, and headliner set lengths are 60 to 75 minutes. Headliner fees range from anywhere from $1,000 to $2 million if you want Lady Gaga or Chance the Rapper or whatever you're programming. But support fees are one thing that are quite standard and quite horrific. And I'd love one day before my lifetime to challenge folks on that industry fee. So
I want to
step in. Yeah, step in.
I want to quickly plug the union here. It is a new hat of mine, but it is something that even I'm learning about coming from that freelance space a lot, is that there are certain agreements that you can go back to, you know, if you feel like you're there and you feel like you deserve more. There are certain agreements like the CPRR where you can go to a venue and say, you know, this is the minimum rate of pay and we'd like to be paid through this agreement. And so there is a Hamilton local. Brent and the team over there at the Hamilton local can help you support. I think it turns that $250 for everyone into $180 per person. So if you're in a band with 5 people and they want you to perform, there is an opportunity for you to get your local to support. I've never used this union hat before, but for your local to support, getting you pay some more money. So, you know, I am, this is why I took this job. I you know, Tao and I have seen it. I'm sure you have, Danielle, as well. Like, you know, people perform for, you know, 30 minutes for $250. There's 7 people on stage. And it is a big part of the reason I actually wanted to work here, because it is horrific. And, you know, if we do really care about developing arts in the city, then it has to be something where, you know, somebody can't go from 1,000 to 2 mil and the person that opened up for them is making $250. So that has to be a collective industry change that we want to make. But, you know, it is really about everything everyone else said, but I am going to plug your union. So go check out your logo.
I can vouch for that. They have the Hamilton Music Union has been able to get my band more money for local festival. They've did their own research, found out what we were getting paid, called us and said, hey, we're actually going to get you this much. And we said, great, thank you. This is why we joined this. This is awesome. So just,
and you know what's incredible when we're talking about knowing your worth, I think the symphonic industry in Canada has defined their worth so well. If you go to anybody who is in a symphony or an orchestra, they know it inside out. They know how much their lunches are worth, their breaks are worth, you know, who should be carrying their tuba from their car to, like, I think it's an industry-wide question that we kind of have to define collectively together about what, you know, that freelance artist is worth and how much we're going to do as a system to support that. So yeah, it's a great question.
Great combo. Like, it's, you know, I'll be working with you, Rooks, on that, pushing that. No problem. Do all the PSAs you can, because it's an important issue.
Excited.
Yeah, your last question, Lisa, was about when are you ready for an agent? When you have your riders in order, you know, and have developed your stage plot, your tech rider, a hospitality rider for non-festival shows. Usually festivals will have their own festival hospitality that's non-negotiable. It's across the board for all the visiting musicians arriving. You got to have that, because that helps your agent, and that also helps your team pitch your show. You know, if someone's interested in your music and they want to send you an offer, for example, but they're working out transitions between act 1 and act 3, and they want to put you in act 2. They need to know, like, if you have 5 people on stage, how to transition you on that stage and out of that stage. Do they have the budget for 5 people? Or had they seen a random Instagram acoustic video of yours with a duo that they are in love with and just want your duo? It's really, really important, because for budgeting and for the fee, tying back to what we're talking about, is like, you know, they might have $2,000 for you for a duo, but want your, you know, full band, but they only have $750 more. So like, they might just have, like, you know, $2,750 offer. Can we get your full band in there? And maybe you can't, but you can bring 3 people, and then you can kind of come to a consensus that way. So riders are important. Travel is important. Do you have band members in your band that you get along with, that you can hang out on the road with for a week or a month or 2 months straight? If an agent's like, hey, I want to put you on this incredible support tour, it's 10 dates from Vancouver to Ontario, can you do it? And you might be like, oh, I want to do it, but I don't have a touring van, I don't have access to a driver, you don't have your own driver's license, can you get a friend to help? So I think to have your touring setup is really pivotal, because cool support offers can sort of like happen in 24 hours of just like, you know, you get the last minute offer, you have to say yes or no right away. So I really recommend having that prepared when you're ready to go. And then the last thing is, when you're ready for an agent, yeah, when you're selling out generally your home market, you know, 200 tickets, 250 tickets, 300, you're growing. You need help booking tours to Montreal, to Ottawa, to Winnipeg, across the country. That's sort of when you need an agent too. If you have awesome music that just connects with people, some agents might contact you and chase you, and then you'll have to get all your assets in order overnight. So it's push and pull. Yeah.
Well, one quick thing to add as well. When I was a music manager, my artist wasn't getting those big shows that, you know, I wanted her to get. And what we did was we took our time and we put together, you know, we asked the venue, can we have this venue for free? They said, fine, we'll take the bar, you'll take the door. We didn't care. We sold that show out with no album out, no music out. She had never released any original music. And it really created, you know, hard ticket point. We just sold out the Revival, 250 tickets, no music. And from that moment on, it created a significant change in what we were able to ask for, right? And so even if no one's asking you yet, put together your own show, put together your own example of, you know, even if this is the one time you called everyone, grandma, like, I need you to be there at 8 o'clock, like, make this your one time where you get everybody who supports your music to show up to that show. So you can say, I can sell 200 tickets, here's the proof. And using that show footage as well was a great example of sending it out to booking agents and saying, this is what we would do on tour. That whole show, it didn't matter. We didn't actually make $1 from it. We broke even, but it was an opportunity for us to create all those assets, create that hard number, and do all those things. So even before somebody asks you, you have the ability to do that yourself.
Excellent. And yeah, knowing those calculations is very important, whether you're putting together your own show or you just know when people are giving you fees. If you're playing with 4 hired musicians and you have to pay them each $150 to play with you, even if that's your better show, you need to know you're going into that show with a $600 cost to you, right? So knowing those calculations before you're actually negotiating, I think gives you a little bit more confidence in negotiating as well. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about performance contracts, especially with COVID and venues shutting down and shows getting canceled. I think, the fine details in those were a little bit more important over the last year and a half. Is there anything musicians should be looking for in a performance contract? Is there any red flags, any advice that you'd give a new artist that maybe is receiving a performance contract for the first time?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it first. Again, I'm always so blown away now that I work at the TMA. The supports, your union almost also is like a free lawyer, There are some agreements and different things that you look at where it's like, for example, in Canada, the in-media, the IMAC agreement that exists, when COVID happened and people were being offered like $50 to do something online, this agreement was in place where it was like, well, no, this is how much you're going to pay me, because even though it's online, it still falls under this agreement. So I think that some of the times when we think about, even in hindsight, some of the things that I've learned from being in this position, I'm like, I wish I knew this was available, because some of the ways that we need to fight for rates or conversations, it's really hard to say, I need this in this agreement. This is what this agreement looks like. Does it even look good? But you can bring that to your local as well. And they'll look at it for you and they'll tell you, no, like, you know what? These are the rates that exist across the market. This is kind of what people are being paid right now. This is what your agreement should look like based on that. Especially if you don't have an entertainment lawyer, I would 100% suggest you talking to a local. But yeah, when I used to go back and do those rates, I think building your network, and a lot of times artists are really focused on connecting with other artists. But man, how many years has it been now since I met Tao? I met her at Canadian Music Week, probably like, I don't know, like 6-7 years ago. I think you were working at Pop Montreal. I don't remember. I think you were.
Yeah, it was CMW. It was CMW, like when I first moved to Toronto.
Yeah, and I wanted to meet as many people as I could. And even though I didn't necessarily know if we would have like some sort of like opportunity to work together, I met her, I saw her, she was cool, she got me, we had a great conversation. And you want to constantly be building your network of people so that you can ask questions like this, like, hey, I met this really cool booking agent that, they might not be booking me, but could I reach out to them and ask them a part of these questions? A part of being an artist is not only having a network of producers and engineers, but it's about having a network of professionals that work in that space so that you can ask them for their, their perspective and their expertise as you start to navigate your career.
I can chat a bit about contracts because I'm a contract nerd. I've analyzed 350 recording contracts and artist management deals when I was at Universal. I was in the business affairs and legal department, and sort of that business knowledge has really helped to start my own business for whatever enterprises or ventures that everyone else is starting up, like your musical career. So show contracts, there's some boilerplate stuff, and they're all negotiable, and they're all, we're going to touch on that of like, what are the negotiation points, and like these boilerplate sort of like basic clauses are all things you can negotiate on. So like time, date, set length, like playing for 75 minutes is a lot more work than playing for 30 minutes. It takes a lot more rehearsal time, a lot more thought and care of how you structure your sets. Merch rate is a big one. If you're a band that really likes apparel and merchandise and you do connect with your fans a lot through your merch teams and your street teams, venues and promoters will often take a cut, for example. If the venue sells, if the club sells, usually it's 85-15. So like 85% in favor of you. So like every t-shirt you sell for $10, you have to cut $1.50 to the venue. So that's like, if the venue sells, if you sell, it might be 90-10. So you keep 90% of the money, they keep 10%. It's just like a fee to have you sell your goods at their venue under their roof. Radius clause is a huge one. Oh, I could have a whole panel about radius clauses. That's also negotiable. You can usually promoters, they're investing in you and your show. They're investing in you and your show and increasing that value. So the most amount of tickets sell within 3 months, 100 kilometers outside of Hamilton on either side. That's a radius clause. That can be negotiated. If you say like, hey, I've got a show in Toronto, but it's just an industry showcase. does this still apply? Like there's ways to negotiate that. Yeah, there's like cancellation clauses, some obviously weather, COVID clauses now. What else? Billing order is a huge one. So are you going to play at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or are you going to play at 9 o'clock at night? So like billing order is also often in contracts. Yeah, those are some of the things. Curfew, show open time, when you're sound check, you're load in. That's sort of like the framework of what a contract will look like.
It's also good to have some kind of like act of God. Like if there's thunder and lightning or something, you do have the right to not play outside and that you should still be getting paid, even though, something happened with the weather or something happened with their equipment or something, that if you don't feel safe to play, that you should still get paid.
And yeah, contracts and agreements, I think, is like such a big part of what I'm even learning about right now, that even that act of God, one of the things that I found really interesting was during, we all started having to play outside because of COVID, and there were certain collective bargaining agreements that was like, it's below 10 degrees. I can't play outside, and those things were protected. So, a lot of times when I was younger, I would watch a lot of people jump into any contract that said that they were getting paid anything, right? But it's like, your contract is binding for them and for you. So make sure you know what you're being bound to, not just so focused when you're reading that agreement of what you're binding them to. It's a two-way street, and you got to make sure that you recognize that you're going to be accountable for what you signed off on as well.
Yeah, and I think we've had a lot of examples more recently of large artists that have talked about bad contracts they've signed or bad deals that they wish they could take back. So I think it's always important to know what you're signing. Make sure you ask questions if you have them, and have somebody who understands the lingo and understands and can explain to you what you're signing, because you never want to be at the point where you're giving, some of your rights or some of your, proper copywritten property away or anything like that. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to some questions from the audience. We've got a couple in the chat here. We will start with, I think this is a great one for what's happening right now. So how have musicians' worth changed with online versus in-person shows?
Or Daniel, did you want to start?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, budgets are hard. Budgets are they've been really, really hard during COVID. I would say they're generally less because people are just trying to get by. So it's just a matter of, you want to play the gig, if you want to do the live stream, if you want to do the gig in whatever form it's in, venues are shutting down and festivals are shutting down, and it's been, from a booking agent perspective, it's been a tough year dealing with budgets, because no one has money and no one's making money, and our infrastructure has been decimated. So everyone's kind of waiting, everyone's like predicting like a roaring 20s of the music industry, as we come back and like fight Delta and like variants that might, come about in the future. But, I've been talking to some American booking agents, they're rebooking tours for the 4th time, 5th time, they thought they had it in the 3rd wave and under control, and, they're still having festivals, but in terms of club shows and routing tours and the whole shabam, it's like fees we're still trying to dig ourselves out of hard fees during the pandemic, from my perspective. Yeah.
My band didn't really play too many online shows. So I can't really speak to like how different they were, but I do know that like, as somebody who does enjoy music, it was like just still so nice to have that option to, go online and see the show and have that experience that I was lacking so much over the like a year and a half or whatever it was. And it was I think there's still like a good market for that. Like you can still make money selling tickets online, and that it's still important to have the live music if you can put it up on your TV and have a glass of wine and enjoy even if it is on your own couch instead of at a bar. I am excited for everything to be fully back though, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that COVID did was it expedited something that was already happening in the music industry, and it fast forwarded a conversation that I think we were all kind of getting towards. What is the responsibility of, our industry to protect musicians during a digital, music or performance space, right? Like I've even prior to COVID, I'd ask people, you going to watch Kanye or something, and they'd be like $500. I'll watch it on Instagram, and like that whole idea that they could replace, that experience of being in person with watching it through somebody else's experience. I think one of the also biggest things is we've started to ask ourselves, what is the quality of the live experience? Like, what is that thing that we actually can't, take away? And so I think that as, live kind of went to the digital space, people were definitely being paid less. But hate to wear this hat again, but like I don't mind wearing it actually. If you look at most symphonic agreements, if you were in the orchestra, you got paid pretty much what you would have gotten paid, regardless of COVID. And it's really made me, that's why I wanted to take this role, was anybody who has had a collective bargaining agreement prior to COVID was all right during COVID. And so there's a piece of that as well. Like, just like people who were working prior to COVID, went from working in the office to working at home. There's a part of thinking about how we protect freelance musicians and gig musicians that I think is a really large conversation that we need to have, because where a lot of gig musicians make money is not necessarily with music, right? It's like you would have performed 100 times this year because TD has sponsored 100 small festivals, right? TD's like, nobody wants to spend money. No one's gonna pay attention. We want our banner up across the street. We don't care if it's up across Instagram, right? And so what you started to notice is, where does the money really come from in this space? A lot of it comes from sponsorship. And if sponsors can't see where their dollars are going, then they're not paying for things. And so I think it does kind of put us in this position now where we have to bring it back. And I love that, that hard ticket, like, what are you worth? Who's willing to buy this ticket from you? Because like Danielle said, there's a lot of people as well who made a lot of money during COVID, because those people would have bought their ticket anyways, right? And so building a structure where, even for myself, I was on a tour before COVID. Like, I'm a public speaker. I was on tour before COVID. I had a $250,000 tour booked in 2020 for me to go across North America and speak. It got canceled. What do? Do you pivot? Do you have another? I released the book, right? And so I think there's an idea there where it's like, in this new market, in this new world, instead of us also just thinking about how do we get back to normal, it's all the things Tal mentioned as well. What does your merch look like? What does your online presence look like? What do your videos look like? Are you monetizing the fact that people will watch your YouTube? Are you monetizing all of these other spaces that exist? Does somebody like the fact that you wear, people will always see me in a hat. Can you release a line of hats? Like, I do think that there's a part of this where whatever you've learned from COVID, don't revert back to just doing one thing when things open up. All of the new channels that you can, monetize your engagement, really, that's what the world is doing. We're monetizing interest. Continue to figure out how to monetize interest in you, so that you're always prepared worst case scenario. And join your local.
Join your local. Yeah, I think as promoters, we learned that hard ticket value that's tied to a location. So we're doing shows in Hamilton when live streams started, and you could do 3 live streams in a week, one's for a festival in Germany, one's for a festival in Hamilton, and one's, in Toronto. If those live streams aren't tied to or territory restricted somehow, we are seeing lower views because they really are worldwide. So I think restricting or knowing how many shows you were doing at that point was important. Unless your fans are going to watch you every single day, it's a lot different than live shows that are in a location and where the people coming are in that location as well. Okay, so somebody asked a question specific to symphony orchestras, Kiana. They asked, Kiana mentioned symphony orchestras. I'm wondering if you have any classical musician focused advice for knowing your worth. And thank you for all your advice so far.
No problem. The classical, I thought rap battles was a feuding. The classical game is tough. You have people who are in their position for 20, 30 years. Tenure is a very real thing. And because orchestras are so protected by collective bargaining agreements, it is a very challenging space to enter. One of the things that I would say in terms of knowing your worth is that every scale, every possible rate that could exist for anybody who plays classical music exists already in a collective bargaining agreement, which is actually why I think the genre is so developed in Canada in terms of even getting funding. You know how much a fourth position flute player is going to make because that's what they've made for the last however long, and it's based on that first collective bargaining agreement, right? And so I would say, again, a place that has all of these rates are your locals. Locals have rates for everything. All of your locals are a part of an organization called the AFM, the American Federation of Music, and Canada has the Canadian Federation of Music, and there are industry standard rates that go across the board that are actually national and in North American based, that they just use across everything. So if you need to do a TV gig on CBC, there's already a rate for that. Whether this is your first time drumming ever, they don't have like first time drummers versus 100-time drummers. They have drummers, right? And so even when you feel like you're new, really take advantage of the fact that a lot of these places have an idea or a sense of what they should be paying you anyways. But are they going to if you don't ask for it? And so this is where I think a big part of knowledge exchange and making sure that you're aware of what's there or already exist is super important. So again, like I know it sounds like I'm preaching this, but join your local. I've learned so much since I've been there for the last 5 weeks that I'm like, man, all this information kind of lives somewhere, but it's only benefiting the people who are in collective bargaining agreements. It's not benefiting freelance. It's not benefiting, same thing for in media. You might be a producer and this is a little, or even in symphonic, if a quartet right now decided to go and do Kim's Convenience and to do their music, they can either go through an agreement and get paid what they should be paid, or they can, go through something else and get paid whatever they're told to be paid. And so that is, I think, the most interesting part is not only, Tao said it best, like, as well as like, venues are closing down. And I think the tough part here is that we kind of think that everyone just kind of has money, and like people are going to undercut because they're also not doing well. So I think it's a part of knowing your value, but also knowing when to like have a little give, when to know like when you're contributing like to this space as well as like, I can make $500 right now, but I'll take $4 because I know you had a rough year and I want you to come back better next year so that I can be here. But I think that those numbers that you're looking for across the board, they're with your locals. They have all of these rates. Literally, I spend my nights reading hundreds of, I'm not a contract nerd or a geek or whatever. I'm struggling with, I read hundreds of contracts where like literally it describes every single detailed position a musician could be in and how much that is worth down to the penny and what the pension contribution should be for that. So it exists and all of these documents are there.
Cool. Okay, I think we're going to do one last question. I think this is an interesting one. So I've been offered a gig, but the organizer event doesn't align with my personal views or brand as a musician. How should I decline the offer? I'm worried about burning bridges. Should I tell the organizer the real reason I am saying no? Or any advice about, something that is not authentic to an artist? How should they go about, not taking that offer? Should they not perform that show? Any thoughts on that?
So my band started off, and like as a solo artist, I started off as like a gigging musician playing, bars, and like I'd be playing like 3 45-minute sets or whatever. And then as I started like more identifying more as an artist versus just like Danielle Bowden, the person who plays every Tuesday night at the Fox and Fiddle or whatever. I felt like it was confusing to people if I wanted to really identify myself as an artist, as somebody who plays original music, who is trying to sell an album. It was confusing when I went and just played covers all night. So like I tried to kind of start saying no to those things, but I did feel awkward doing that. Like like an easy way to do it is just to say, I'm booked already. I don't know if any of you have like any other suggestions on like a nice way to not be the bad guy, like you said, but.
I think the Indigenous community does an incredible job of this. You know, I've been in a position where I've tried to book or connect, and this is not just for performances, but even like placements or like, you know, sponsorships where the questions come up and it's like, hey, this is kind of what I believe in, would love to be a part of what you're doing. But, you know, one of the greatest questions I've ever heard in a huge sponsorship contract was, you know, does this company support like, you know, the like fossil fuel industry? Because this is like a really important thing for me and I would love to take up your offer. But what would be, even if you do support it, what would be moving forward kind of your commitment to this conversation? Not going in any direction, but using this as a moment. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I've watched people use moments where it's uncomfortable, instead of walking away, or instead of saying no to an opportunity or burning bridges, they've used it to create a conversation that otherwise would have never happened because that company or that platform sees the value in you. So it's I think it's tough because we live in a very cancel culture space, but is this also an opportunity for you based on where you're at to have a conversation with them about like, you know, ways in which you would like to see them to move differently? And I know that's not anybody's job to necessarily be educating people on what to do or how to exist, but I tend to be, you know, the person in the room who says things that nobody really wants to hear quite often. And you know, I've learned that sometimes being that person is tough, but sometimes people don't know. Sometimes people aren't aware of the way that they're having impact or the lack of impact that they are having. And you know, conversation is always good on all parts. That's my first answer. The second answer is exactly what Danielle said. You're booked. You know, like move on. I don't think they're if you don't want to have a conversation and you don't want to bring something up, I don't think that there's really anything else to say then. You know, if you don't want to come to my birthday party, don't tell me it's because you don't like cake. You know, just tell me you're busy, okay? You know, unless we're gonna have a conversation about what else I can have at my party, right? And so there's a little bit of responsibility that comes if you want to have that conversation as well.
Yeah, really, really good thoughts. I'm the agent, so the go-between and the artist rep. So I'm like 100% responsible for those awkward conversations. And I like to be upfront about that stuff. And I think early on when I started Blue Crane, I was too upfront about them. And now I've like chilled out a bit. I think it really depends on who the audience is. Is it like, what city do you live in? Do you live in a town? Do you live in a large city? What is the organization you're talking to? Is it, you know, the longtime booker in your tiny town where like, you know, it would be a lot to burn bridges with that person? Or is it like a mega corporation that doesn't really care about you at the end of the day? Maybe it's worth your time to tell those people off, because who knows, that might go up the ranks to a manager and they may be able to rejig an offer, like rejig their mission or their mandate, or even like think about that, you know, even to start a dialogue in their boardroom. So I think it really depends who you're dealing with and what your relationship and investment is to that specific promoter company or to that organization. You know, I book a lot of Indigenous musicians, and it is a thing, you know, like we were going to do something with a conference who wanted to book one of my DJs, and they replied that the set, they rescinded the offer in the end because they said the set wasn't cultural enough. According to who? According to, you know, the white booker who was extending the offer, who doesn't really have a say on like whether this set is cultural enough or not. What does that mean? I think they were looking for a dancer to come out with headdress, traditional costume, like everything. And it was just like, that's not why we're in this business. The reason why you want to hire this person should be allowing that DJ or that artist to define what is a cultural set in their terms, because they know best. So I had to have a hard chat about that. But I did it politely, you know. I was just like, just so you know, some phrases like a set not being cultural enough can be offensive to a particular artist because of this reason and this reason, and just like left it at that, you know. But those are hard conversations to have, and I think it's just pick your battles, see who you're talking to, and yeah, and see how invested you are to that person or that organization. But yeah, you can always say you're booked. You can always say you're unavailable. You can say you're not taking bookings in that period. You can say you're in the studio, you're recording, you're doing something else. So if it's just non-negotiable for you, and just
say you're quarantining.
Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you, everyone. So we're kind of at the end of our time here. Somebody did write in the chat, so I just want to let everybody know the Hamilton City Council recently enacted a new policy about minimum wage pay for musicians at city events, which is amazing. We actually were just nominated for a Music Cities Events Global Music Award for that. So it's really awesome. If you haven't heard about that, you can find a lot of information. The union was very active in that, as well as our HMAT team. So that's a very, very good standard for Hamilton to set. And I'm really proud of our city for doing that. So I wanted to thank all of today's speakers for being here. It's a great conversation. I want to give everybody just a couple of seconds if there's any projects you want to mention or promote, or any final words that you have, and then we will be ending this conversation. So Danielle, did you want to start?
Well, my band spent quarantine recording our next album. Oh my goodness, sorry. All of my cat's auto feeders are going off right now. So I'm just gonna say, follow my band on Instagram, and you can subscribe to us on YouTube. That would be really helpful for us. We're trying to monetize our music videos, and you can check out our website. We post all of our upcoming events on there, and yeah, you can stay in touch with us and ask us any questions.
Great, thanks. Rooks, final words?
Yeah, honestly, you know, I'm always telling people to approach your career like a business. It's really hard for you to fight for yourself if you don't know where you are in the conversation. And the more you know about music business is actually the more that you're going to set yourself up for success. You know, I long gone are the days when, you know, it's kind of like, I'm just going to play at a bar and somebody rich and famous is going to see me and I'm going to be famous. You know, there's so much competition now, there's so much going on, but don't lose faith in the music industry. You know, we actually work in one of the most you know, resilient industries in the world. No matter what time, no matter what technology, no matter what's happening, people want music. Music is a way that we connect. It's a way that we understand each other, and so continue to create. Join your union. You know, Hamilton is leading the way on this, and across, you know, I was at a conference across the country. Shout out Hamilton's union for getting something like this through the door. Once the city embraces a minimum wage for artists, then it means private companies and everyone else has to kind of embrace the same change. And so kudos to you. Congratulations on winning your award. If you're ever looking for me, it's just @Rooks on Instagram. And yeah, we're in your city now, so we're gonna be out here, and hopefully we can be a little bit more a part of the infrastructure.
Cool, I hope so. Tao, any last thoughts?
Not really. I can't top that, Rooks. I'm, you know, shout out to Hamilton, and I really feel the union roots in this city hardcore with the recent election. So I'm in Ward 3. Shout out to Ward 3, and excited to just do more here. You know, I had a baby during pandemic, and just excited to have taken him to Festival of Friends and Gage Park and all the shows that happen at the band shell, and just discovering all the art and music here. So thanks for having us today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Reminder, this is only day 1 of 5 of the conference. So check out at Hammont Music to see what the rest of the sessions are. And thank you, everybody, our speakers and the audience, for joining us today.